Hi, I'm Bella Perez Rubio, Puma Podcast, and you're listening to Teka Teka News. Balitang thinking, hindi breaking. In this episode,
This is the war of for existence for Ukraine. It's a genocidal and colonial war for Russia. And more important is the war of the authoritarian, undemocratic, and violent state to destroy the world order and the international law, which will endanger every smaller country in the world. Their victory will give the right for every big country to dictate their commands to the smaller neighbors or even annex their territory. That's what is going on.
this week marks a full year since Russia launched a brutal, full scale invasion of Ukraine. What role can the Philippines play to help end it?
There are lots of ways to show support. So, first of all, we want your political support because every vote counts in the United Nations General Assembly, and the Philippines is a very influential country. The population more than 100 million people. So support is very important. And here in ASEAN, it might influence those countries who still did not realize that there is no neutral position in this war, because this is a textbook example when one country is attacking another one on its sovereign territory and committing cruelties and atrocities.
That's Denis Mikhailuk. He's charge d'affaires interim of the Ukrainian embassy in Malaysia, which also has jurisdiction in the Philippines. If he sounds familiar, that's because his name was all over the local news just last month. Reporters had picked up an offhand comment he made about a pending call between Presidents Marcos and Zelensky. But the phone call that Ukraine had been requesting since June last year finally took place last week.
President Marcos confirmed the position of the Republic of Philippines of strong support of Ukraine's territorial integrity and sovereignty. And we rely here on this statement because tomorrow, day after tomorrow, might be a vote in the General Assembly of the United Nations on the resolution to commemorate 1 year of this barbaric invasion of Russian Federation, to support Ukraine's territorial integrity, sovereignty, and to support Ukraine's peace plan of 10 steps for peace formula, which might be useful to stop this war and to re-establish the world order after this war and will be ended. So we hope for the best, and this phone call between the presidents is always a good sign. It shows that the relations between two countries are top priority for the leadership of the countries.
Mikhailuk adds that the Philippines can also show its support by strengthening economic ties with Ukraine. He says long term contracts in the areas of digitization, energy, and the importation of Ukrainian sunflower oil would be beneficial to both countries. But there's another country crafting a peace plan of its own: China. President Xi Jinping is expected to deliver a speech before the UN this week, proposing ways to broker peace between Russia and Ukraine. So I asked Mikhailuk if Ukraine was consulted by Beijing in the drafting of these plans.
Unfortunately, not. That's why we don't expect much of that. And taking into consideration the rhetorics of the Chinese government, so we expect that it will be some support of Russian position. But let us first see this. Maybe I am wrong completely here, and will be the masterpiece of diplomacy, which will take into consideration of needs of my people as well as the needs of the international community. I do hope so.
China crafting a peace plan has definitely raised some eyebrows. After all, Beijing boasts a quote unquote no limits friendship with Moscow. It's also one of the few countries still trading with the heavily sanctioned state.
China is the only market for Russian goods as of now. and the only source of technology, high-tech products. So before these issues will be settled, Russia will be under sanctions. It might be 50 years, it might be even longer. And so during this period, China will be one of the countries who will be benefiting from the trade with Russia as their, depot natural resources. That's why they don't want Russia to be defeated and to be reformed. They want to preserve them in the states like they are.
It's been reported that China's plan will focus on respecting the principle of territorial integrity. But China advocating for territorial integrity might grind on the ears of neighboring countries locked in fierce territorial disputes with a superpower. That, of course, includes us.
It might be based on Chinese theory of historical territories. Is the basis for their claims of the disputed territories on the South China Sea, for example. They claim that 10,000 years ago, some Chinese legendary fishermen were there. That's why this is not Filipinos, but Chinese. It was completely overthrown by the international arbitrage. And you have all the rights here. And we support your position here. Same thing with Russia and Ukraine. Russia is declaring that there is no Ukrainian nation. Ukrainians does not exist. So it's completely fairy tale, not based on reality.
The Ukrainian official adds that there are lessons we can learn from his country's experience.
When somebody is telling you that they're going to take something from you or they're going to kill you, you should believe. You should be prepared. You should maintain the level of the readiness of your society, of your military, of your civilian emergency forces on a high level of readiness. You should work on the mechanisms with the neighbors like ASEAN to establish the not for them just to express deep concern, but to be able to do something in real.
We'll pause here, but when we return, we talk about how Ukraine is really doing after a year of conflict.
Teka. Before we continue, singit lang ako. Hi, I'm Kat Ventura, the executive producer of Teka News. If you like learning about the lives of change makers, I think you love another podcast we at Mua Podcast have produced, and which I host. The podcast is called Kasama sa Pagbabago, where we talk to 20 or 30-something-year-olds who are making significant changes in society. A new episode comes out every other Friday. Have a listen. Hi fam! Jose Rizal once said, "Ang kabataan, ang pag-asa ng bayan." Pero sino nga ba itong mga youth change makers from our generation? Are you G to hear their stories? Ano kaya ang naging inspirasyon nila para magsimula ng pagbabago sa community nila? What challenges did they have to overcome? And what did they learn in the process?
Na-realize namin na hindi naman pala natin kailangan maging sikat for us to become part of the community of change makers.
Kahit saan man mapunta, bit-bit sana talaga dapat natin yung mga karanasan para mas maging mabuting tao.
Maging servant leaders tayo, and yung change na pinapangarap natin para sa mga kapwa natin Pilipino at sa buong Pilipinas dapat na magsimula sa inyo.
Mas makikilala pa natin sila dito sa Kasama sa Pagbabago, isang podcast kung saan inaalam natin kung ano-ano ang mga pagbabagong sinisimulan ng mga kabataan sa kani-kanilang komunidad, and why they believe that the youth is truly the hope of our nation. Ang Kasama sa Pagbabago ay isang podcast ng Youth Leadership for Democracy o YouthLED, a project of the Asia Foundation and the United States Agency for International Development, powered by Puma Podcast. So stay tuned, fam! A new episode drops every other Friday. Follow Kasama sa Pagbabago on Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Now, back to the episode.
Everybody should remember that the war started in 2014 with the annexation of Crimea and supporting with the military force of separatist movement inspired by Russia on the eastern part of Ukraine. But on the 24th of February last year, the full-scale invasion of more than 200,000 Russian troops was launched and had the goal to destroy the country in a very short period of time, several days or a couple of weeks.
Clearly, that's not what happened. But in the meantime, Ukrainians have paid the ultimate price. The United Nations, in its latest report, said at least 8,000 civilians have died and nearly 13,300 have been injured since Russia's invasion. The UN also said that the true number of casualties is likely much higher than what they've been able to track.
The bad thing about all of this is that the war is on our territory, and we are paying full and ultimate toll for it with our lives, the blood of our beloved, with the destroyed and reduced to ruble cities, the damage to our infrastructure.
Several top US officials, including President Joe Biden, have accused Russia of committing crimes against humanity. The Russian military has targeted civilian infrastructure, including nuclear power plants in the middle of winter. Tens of millions of Ukrainians have been forced to flee their country, creating the largest refugee crisis of this century. Nearly 3 million Ukrainians have relocated to Russia, and for some, it was not by choice.
To go to the Russian territory, among them up to 700,000 kids. And they launched the swift program of adoption these Ukrainian kids into Russian families, making them, assimilating them and making them Russian deprived and taking them out of their families, or even sometimes killing their parents and then putting them to Russian orphanages in Russian families.
We have no way of verifying if that's true, but a UN report did relay numerous accounts of summary executions, torture, and rape perpetrated by Russian troops against Ukrainian civilians.
And they're trying to attack cities with civilians to intimidate the population and to make them demand peace on any price. This never works. It appeared not effective tactics even during the Second World War. It makes people more resilient and willing to fight and to retaliate for the beloved they lost.
Move forward.
This week, US President Joe Biden made a historic surprise visit to Kyiv. As Biden and Zelensky walked the capital streets, air raid sirens blasted in the background. It was a highly symbolic show of unwavering support from the US. It was also a stark reminder of how well Ukraine has defended its territory against all odds. Around this time last year, top US intelligence officials worried that Kyiv would fall in a matter of days. A day after his visit, Biden said this in a speech delivered in Poland.
1 year ago, the world was bracing for the fall of Kyiv. Well, I just come from a visit to Kyiv, and I can report Kyiv stands strong. Kyiv stands proud. It stands tall. And most important, it stands free.
And that was today's episode of Teka Teka News. Again, I'm Bella Perez Rubio. This episode was produced by Kat Ventura and edited by Pedoy Blanco. If you like this episode, share it with a friend or two. And don't forget to give it a 5-star rating on your podcast app. At para sa mga mahilig manood sa YouTube, Puma Podcast na rin po kami doon. Just search Puma Podcast and subscribe to our channel. Thanks for listening.